Hey everybody, just a short one today, and let's get straight into it. On January 8th, 2020, Donald Trump's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, told him that COVID was likely going to be a really big deal, that the disease was airborne, that it's far deadlier than even a strenuous flu, that it impacts the old as well as the young, that it presented a substantial risk to Americans, etc. We know Trump knew this information because recently, journalist Bob Woodward released a number of interviews, what we'll call the COVID tapes, where Trump explicitly says all of it, makes it clear that he was aware of just how much of a threat this virus could be. And in one of the most interesting moments of the tape, Trump says this.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
He wanted to play it down. He still wants to play it down. His misinformation about the virus, his undermining of masks, his constant comparisons of COVID to the flu, something he just did even after he literally got COVID, are revealed to be what we always knew them to be. A campaign of misinformation against the American public. A campaign that, as it turns out, began long before we, Americans without access to top secret information, had an inkling that COVID might be a problem here.
You know, this is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. So this is deadly stuff.
On September 9th, 2020, CNN reported on this story with the help of correspondent Jamie Gongol. And as she presents these tapes to the audience, as she hears Trump talk about how he lied, Gongol says this.
But John, this wasn't just about panic. The White House, we know, is very concerned about the economy. The president is very concerned about getting reelected.
And this 5-second quote is what we are going to talk about today. This quote kind of blew me away. So what is Gongol saying here? Well, I'd say it's two things, right? First, that she is dubious of the president's motivations. He says that he lied to the American public in order to not cause a panic. She says that's bullshit. In fact, he most likely lied to keep the stock market rising, to secure his re-election. Second, she's implying that this is relevant to the way we interpret this situation on a moral level. This is kind of a tough claim to make, and I can't really prove it, but watching Gongol's performance here, seeing the disgust on her face as she describes the way that Trump lied about his motives, I can't help but have the feeling that to her, this is a really important part of the president's wrongdoings.
But John, this wasn't just about panic. The White House, we know, is very concerned about the economy.
Let's put a pin in all that for a second and digress into a bit of a thought experiment. What happens to somebody when they are arrested on the charge of murder? Well, you might say they would be brought into a court. Two attorneys would speak about whether or not they committed the crime. Then the jury would say whether they were guilty or not guilty, and then they'd be set free or put in prison on that basis. Now, this is of course true. A great answer, by the way. Kudos on your incredible answer to that question. But it is incomplete. Because alongside the process that tries to determine your guilt, there's another process, a psychological process. Why did this person commit the crime? Who are they, and how would we go about making them less violent? Were they a victim to some form of psychosis? Were they in control of the situation? See, justice in our society is not just a matter of figuring out who did what. It's also a process of producing a subject who can be judged, a moral entity who can stand before the law and face its decision. For all intents and purposes, then, we invent a soul, because it is a soul and not just a body that we want to discipline and punish. Now, I bring all this up because we can sort of see this process unfolding in the way that Gongol treats the COVID tapes. For much of her coverage, she is engaged exclusively with the corpus of evidence. What did Trump know and when did he know it?
Remember, for those of us from Watergate, Howard Baker, what did the president know and when did he know it? That's what Bob Woodward lays out in this book.
But in the moment that she hears Trump claim that he lied about the pandemic in order to allay a national panic, she almost reflexively begins to engage with this secondary psychological process. Here, he's saying that while he certainly did lie about the pandemic, he had reasonable motives for doing so, preventing an ostensibly bad thing, people freaking out. There's a sense here that Donald Trump is threatening Gongol's simple evaluation of the COVID tapes, that he is exonerating his own soul, and she can't have that. No. You lied about this extremely bad thing, and maybe more importantly, you lied for extremely bad reasons. In order to judge Trump, to make moral claims about these tapes, we can't just rely on discussions of what he did and didn't do. Rather, we must also understand and be able to condemn the man himself. That's what justice is. Okay, am I about to look you in the eyes and say, I disagree with Jamie Gongol on this one? Normally, I'm a huge Gongol stan, but she really missed the mark here. Donald Trump has a beautiful soul, and whatever you think about his actions, he always has the best of intentions. Well, no, I think she's probably right about this one. In my opinion, Donald Trump is bad, and I'm not offended by anybody saying that. But what I do want to look at here is the way that this understanding of justice, as applied to Donald Trump in this situation, leads us to some pretty strange and kind of unsettling conclusions. Conclusions about what Donald Trump represents and about what this CNN report actually works to accomplish. And let's explore that. So, whenever you make an ethical claim about anything, whenever you say that a fact is relevant to your moral assessment of a situation, you are also saying that the inverse claim would be relevant. That might sound confusing, but it's really not. If I say that you stole my dog and that that's a bad thing, then I accept that if you didn't steal my dog, then the opposite is probably true. You didn't do a bad thing. Stop biting me. And given this, we have to recognize that when Gongol stakes any of her moral interpretation of the COVID tapes on Trump lying about his motives, she's saying that if he didn't lie there, then her assessment would change. Her opinion is tied, for better or worse, to Donald Trump's soul. But here's the problem. Donald Trump's soul is a social fiction. It is a complicated prop. That's it. If you asked me, do you think Donald Trump is a good person, I'd say no. But what if I thought that political correctness was a meaningful threat to free speech in America? What if I thought that trickle-down economics was a great idea? What if I thought that undocumented immigrants from Mexico were an incredibly serious problem, one that the mainstream media constantly lies about? Well, maybe he'd start to look a little better, a little more virtuous, a little more honest. That's the thing, right? There is no essential Donald Trump. For most of us, he exists merely as a function of language, a reflection of our beliefs. And so, when Gongol centers her investigation on Trump's psyche, what we find is kind of hollow. CNN says he was lying about his motives and that information is important, and that just leaves room open for the White House or Fox News or internet man Tim Pool to say the same thing in the opposite direction. Yes, his motives are important, and whether you agree with him or not, Trump did what he did for a rational, thoughtful reason. He thought he was doing the right thing.
They wanted me to come out and scream, people are dying, we're dying. No, we did it just the right way. We have to be calm.
And, what are we even supposed to do with that? For all intents and purposes, they are just as right as she is, because Donald Trump is just whoever you want him to be. The conversation was over before it began. And is this necessary? Is this vague, ambiguous way of evaluating the COVID tapes really the only way we can talk about them morally? Well, no, it's not. You know, just because somebody provides a moral sounding rationale for a thing they did, that doesn't make it a good rationale or even a coherent one. If I stole your dog and you asked me why I did that, I could say, well, I think I'm amazing at raising dogs, and that any dog would flourish in my care. Now, you could believe me about my motives or not, but either way, a reasonable response here is, dude, there's many ways of getting a dog. You didn't need to take my dog, who I love. And also, no matter what, even if there wasn't a lot of ways of getting a dog, you can't steal my dog. She's mine. Oh! So it is with Trump. Even if he did want to prevent a national panic, he could have done that in a number of ways. He could have been normal, taken the virus seriously, and had more aggressive policies to combat it. He could have not told people in states with lockdown orders to liberate themselves. He could have not called mask usage politically correct.
I couldn't hear you. Can you take it off because I cannot hear you?
I'll just speak louder, sir.
Oh, okay, good. You want to be politically correct.
He could have not lied. To say that Donald Trump's stated motives here were disingenuous is completely missing the point. The point being, he murdered countless people, an act that his intentions, true or not, does nothing to justify or even really explain. So I guess it's time we ask the question of the day, why do I care about any of this? Like, it's a 5-second clip from a random correspondent. And even if I'm right that the moral framework she applies to this situation is inadequate and unnecessary, why does that matter to me at all? And honestly, I think it just kind of struck a nerve with me. You know, when I listen to these sections of the COVID tapes, I find them really moving because it was just a choice. Like, I often find myself thinking of Trump as this bad faith evil figure who's so steeped in his own lies that he hardly knows what the truth is anymore. But this is not the case. He knew what he was doing. Every step of the way, he knew it was bullshit. And looking at that, I can't help but have this visceral reaction, like, is that democracy? Like, that information about the coronavirus, that wasn't Donald Trump's, right? It didn't belong to him. It was our information. But here, we just left that in his hands, his incentive systems, his business connections. On January 8th, 2020, Robert O'Brien gave a brief where he explained that the coronavirus was an enormous threat to the United States. He said that, and then Donald Trump was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna use that info to do less than nothing. And that was his power, his privilege, his right. It was his right to murder us. And we know that for a fact because nobody stopped him. Is that democracy? And watching this gongle coverage, we're left with none of that. None of that complicated, interpretive possibility space. None of those valuable questions. Because of the way justice is understood and deployed here, all we really get to think about is Trump's ego. Were his motives pure? Is he going to heaven? This self-defeating nonsense that reduces our perspective to a series of irrelevant and unfalsifiable claims about who Donald Trump is. But we don't get to talk about what he is. And we don't get to talk about what he was able to do. And I don't know. It might sound silly to say this about a 5-second clip, but I think we need more than that. Hey everybody there, thanks so much for watching my video. I hope you liked it. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, give me money on Patreon if you want to. I'll probably release some extra footage of my dog there. And now it's time for my Patreon question of the video. Salmonolon. I'm sorry if this is a real name that I'm butchering and not just a username. Salmonolon asks, guinea pigs v hamsters. Guinea pigs. Guinea pigs. Guinea pigs is the answer to that question. They're cuter. Okay. That's it. That's the question done now.